Welcome back. We're talking with Republican Senator Anthony Cannella about Governor Brown's proposed budget. In his State of the State speech, Governor Brown said, quote, "Each of us will have to struggle with our conscience and our constituencies as we hammer out a sensible plan to put our state on sound fiscal footing." Unquote. Perhaps there's no bigger philosophical hurdle for Republicans to clear than the issue of taxes. So I wanted to ask you, Senator Cannella, a lot of Republicans, most of the Republican senators, I think you're one of the two that didn't sign a no tax pledge before running for office. Now, Grover Norquist, the president of the Americans for Tax Reform, has told GOP lawmakers that even a vote to place the question before the voters will be as deadly for their careers as actually voting for a tax. First, do you agree with that logic?
You know what, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused really at the task at hand, and the task at hand is really trying to govern California and move California forward. So whether it's what other interpretations are, I'm not really following that. Okay, well, the thing I want to ask you was, the governor is going to need to get 2 Republicans in the Assembly and 2 Republicans in the Senate in order to put, even to put the tax proposal on the ballot. Do you think there's any possibility that he's going to get enough Senate votes, Republican votes, to put this before the voters in a June special election? I don't see any Republican support for the governor's plan right now, quite frankly. Okay. Recently Senator Bob Dutton, who's the Senate Republican leader, said the Republicans would, kind of following what you're saying, absolutely not be willing to allow voters to extend taxes in exchange for achieving historic reforms. I'm just wondering, there's some people say now there's an opportunity for Republicans to really pass some of their most cherished reforms. Is that a golden opportunity that maybe Republicans are missing? Well, I think that you can do one without the other. I think this is an opportunity to get major reforms in government, but it's because it's good policy. We need, ultimately, the goal should be getting people back to work, because if you get people back to work, then there's more money being paid in income tax and sales tax, and so we really need to reform government. Things like regulatory reform where people can make a living in the state, and pension reforms which right-size the government, and spending caps. So I'm working very hard on trying to do that, because ultimately that's what's going to save the state of California. If we just, the governor just wants to put taxes on the ballot and increase taxes, we haven't dealt with the real problems in the state of California. So if that makes it to the ballot and those taxes expire, then we really haven't solved the problem, so we'll be right back where we are now. Well, can we dig down a little deeper on the kinds of reforms you think might be the kinds of reforms Republicans would like to see, if they even remotely consider putting a tax measure on the ballot? What kinds of reforms do you think are really important to Republicans? Well, I can say, again, I can speak for myself. I think pension reform is a must. If you believe some of the studies that have been done, Stanford studies showed that pension have a $500 billion unfunded liability. Well, I think one of the issues there was they were saying that they were looking at a 4% rate of return, where the CalPERS, I think, was looking at a 7 or 8% rate of return. The question is, what is the appropriate? So $200 billion to $500 billion. Either way, we have an $86 billion general fund. So I think pension reform is a necessity to get this state back on track. Can I ask a question? How far do you think, how far would you be willing to go on that? I mean, there's one of the proposals, the kind of stuff happening in Wisconsin, where they're saying, we're not going to allow public employees to negotiate collectively over these issues. Yeah. And then a little less draconian in those issues, saying that, for example, new employees might have a defined contribution plan, a 401k type plan, or will encourage more contributions by employees. I mean, where are you on that continuum? Well, I think the Little Hoover Commission came out with their recent analysis of pensions, and I think they offer some very good proposals. So I think that's a great place to start, and dig down from there. But clearly, what we're doing is not going to work. I mean, we can no longer guarantee these pensions for life, because ultimately it'll bankrupt the state. So, as far as I'm concerned, we need to look at everything. Okay. Well, I want to ask you, we've only got about a minute left. I want to ask you a quick question on the June special election. What if it doesn't happen? What if either the Republicans decide they're not going to support this, it never gets to the ballot, or 2 Republicans do decide to support it in the Senate and the Assembly, and it does get to the ballot, but the voters don't approve it? Then where are we? Well, then we'll have to cut $26 billion from the budget. That's, again, those are things that... And to put it in context, it's about, what, an $84 billion budget? Right. That's a chunk of change. No, it would be very painful. There's no question about it. But again, I keep coming back to the point that families have been making these cuts for many years. Businesses have been making these cuts. Local governments have been making these cuts. And you know what? The state of California, unfortunately, will have to make these cuts as well, unless we change government we become a little more business friendly through some of the regulatory reform and some of these other options that get people back to work, because we are clearly, in my opinion, the greatest state and the greatest country in the world. There's no reason why we should have unemployment as high as it is. I think we lead the nation in unemployment. So those are the areas that we need to focus on, because those are the long-term fixes that will get us back on track.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Senator Cannella, for joining us. When we come back, we'll ask Democratic Senator Michael Rubio whether the Democrats can say no to a traditional ally, the public employee unions. That conversation when we return. This is the Maddy Report.